Now I'd like to introduce Mindy Reiser, who is the Vice President of the Study Center, and she will introduce the talk and she'll introduce the speaker, and after the speaker has finished her presentation, she'll also ask the questions coming out of the chat box and some that she'll make up herself. So Mindy, take it away.
Great. Okay, welcome everyone. There are at this moment some 134 of you. So thanks very much for giving part of your evening to what I assure you will be a very illuminating discussion and presentation. Let me introduce Renee. Renee Dayan was born and raised in Mexico City and has a BA in communications from Anahuac University and an MA in Judaic Studies and Political Analysis from the Iberoamericana University. She was a member of President Vicente Fox's transition team on religious affairs and a member of the National Council to Prevent Discrimination. She has served on the executive board of the Magen David community, founded by Jews from the Syrian community of Aleppo. She represents the Mexican Jewish community on anti-Semitism forums, such as the Cantor Database for the Study of Anti-Semitism and Racism in Tel Aviv University in Israel. Since 1997, Renee has served as executive director of Tribuna Israelita, an institution that sensitizes public opinion to the risks of anti-Semitism, and she actively participates in debates on national issues. And now, Renee.
Hi, thank you. Thank you all for being part of this session. I would like to start thanking especially Jerry and Mindy for getting in touch with me. It's a pleasure to be part of this effort to show you what the Jewish community of Mexico is. Our community numbers around 45,000 in a country of 120 million people. We have a very strong community that is seen as an important player in the country. I have to tell you that we are very proud of our community, and we think that part of its success is that we are highly organized and we provide all kinds of services, and we are a source of identity with a strong Jewish school network and very low percentage of assimilation. And before talking more about the community, I would like to share with you a video of what our community is. Second.
Okay.
My family. Here it is.
The Jewish presence in Mexico dates back to 1519, when the first Spanish conquerors arrived to the country. Nevertheless, the organized Jewish community began to settle at the end of the 19th century and the beginning of the 20th, when Jews, mainly from Europe and the Ottoman Empire, fled their countries looking for new horizons due to instability and anti-Semitism. In Mexico, Jews organized in communities according to their countries of origin. The first community formally established in Mexico was the Mount Sinai Community, founded in 1912 with the purpose of helping Jewish immigrants. In 1914, the land for the first Jewish cemetery was bought, signaling the new community's desire to settle down in this country. Today, this community includes Jews who came from the city of Damascus in Syria and from Lebanon. 1922, Jews from Central and Eastern Europe established the Ashkenazi community. In 1938, the Magen David community integrated by Jews from Aleppo, Syria was created. Shortly after, in 1941, the Sephardic community formed by Jews from Greece, Turkey, and the Balkans was formally organized. All these communities maintain an Orthodox religious affiliation. In the middle of the 20th century, the largest institution of the Mexican Jewish community was created, the Jewish Sports Center, which gathers members of all the communities. In 1957, English-speaking immigrants, mainly from the United States, established the first conservative community in Mexico, Beth Israel Community. Lastly, in 1961, the Bethel community, also of conservative affiliation, was formed by Spanish-speaking Jews. Simultaneously, other Jewish communities were created in Guadalajara, Monterrey, and Tijuana, and more recently in Cancun and San Miguel de Allende. All of these communities provide religious, social, cultural, and educational services, as well as social care and conciliation and arbitration services. A large variety of newspapers, magazines, and digital media are published, reflecting the different ideological trends of the communities and the institutions. In 1938, due to the intense persecution of European Jews under the Nazi threat and changes in the general law of population, which restrained Jewish immigration to Mexico, the Central Committee was founded as a pro-refugee institution. 6 years later, Tribuna Israelita was established to counteract anti-Semitism. Today, the Central Committee is the representative institution of the Jewish community of Mexico. Its main duty is to establish and maintain a relationship with national authorities at all levels: federal, state, and municipal. As well as with political and social players in the country. It actively participates in the national agenda in fields such as security, human rights, anti-discrimination, and social work concerning the most needy. The Central Committee is also part of the World Jewish Congress and works jointly with Jewish institutions of the United States, such as the American Jewish Committee and the Anti-Defamation League on issues of bilateral interest. It maintains close relations with Jewish communities worldwide as well, particularly with those in the United States, Latin America, and Israel. Through Tribuna Israelita, it establishes ties with the media, social networks, religious, intellectual, and academic groups, portrays a real image of the Jewish community and helps eliminate prejudices and stereotypes. Through its Community Securities Committee, it oversees institutional security and civilian protection programs. The Social Action Committee supports community members who are victims of delinquency, working in coordination with the national authorities. The Strategic Analysis Committee was created with the goal of planning for the future generations and establishing policies and actions to face the most urgent problems. Education has always been a central issue in Judaism. In Mexico, more than 95% of Jewish school-age children attend Jewish day schools. The Jewish Education Network is affiliated to the Secretary of Public Education and follows the official national curricula. In addition, Jewish day schools provide the Jewish education that allows us to maintain and transmit our ancestral values to future generations. Simultaneously, children and young adults in our community participate in social and cultural organizations, which provide an adequate environment for their integral development and reinforce their Jewish-Mexican identity. Likewise, college students are active in their campuses and work together with Tribuna Israelita, organizing Jewish cultural programs in their universities to provide greater and better understanding of Judaism in general and of the Jewish community of Mexico in particular. The Mexican Federation of Jewish Youth gathers and represents all these organizations. The dynamic activism of the Jewish women represented by the Women's Federation is reflected both in national and community projects. For over 8 decades, it has established assistance programs in different social-economic sectors that help and support hospitals, homes for the elderly, schools, orphanages, daycare centers, the Red Cross, and social care governmental organizations, and plays an important role during natural disasters by working closely with Cadena, the Help Committee for National Emergencies and Disasters. Aware of its environment, the Jewish community promotes and participates in many innovative social projects that improve the quality of life in the most in-need sectors. Through institutions dedicated to promote relations between Israel and Mexico, academic, cultural, technological, and commercial exchanges between both countries are implemented. New needs and new challenges have prompted the creation of different organizations within the community where thousands of volunteers participate. These organizations work on preventing and treating addictions, domestic violence, inclusion of people with disabilities to society, technological education, business training, entrepreneurship promotion, health programs, and activities for the elderly. Intellectuals, academics, scientists, artists, businessmen, public officials, professionals, and leaders of civil organizations, all of them members of the Jewish community of Mexico, fully contribute with their work to the development of our country. With more than a century of organized life, the Jewish community stands firm, united, active, and vibrant, integrated to the social and cultural life of Mexico. The Jewish Community of Mexico, Community of Communities.
Okay.
Okay. So this is a glance of what our community is. And as I told you before, we are very proud of it. And I would like to share some other aspects that I think they're interesting, and then open for Q&A if that's fine with everybody. Okay. First of all, I would like to talk a little bit about our country. Mexico is among the world's 50 largest economies. The country is highly dependent on the United States, its largest trading partner and destination of 80% of its exports. In July 2019, Andrés Manuel López Obrador was elected president with 53% of the vote. His party, Morena, won the majority in the Chamber of Deputies, and with the support of his allies, has a majority on the Senate. His main message is the fight against corruption. Mexico's public finances are stable, but even before the pandemic, we had very slow economic growth. The government has engaged in many assistance programs and will need many resources to deliver the promises. For the first time in Mexico, we are going to have re-election of deputies in June, which will define if the president will keep the majority in the Congress. And as in many other countries, the pandemic has increased the problems, and we expect that the growth will be lowering in the coming months. We are talking about the pandemic, and I would like to share with you what the community did during this difficult time. Since the very beginning, we started working, taking actions to protect our associates. With the advice of the medical board, we established strong security measures, suspending all activities even before the government did. We keep a record of all the people that have been infected and have a call center and a webpage where people can call and ask for advice. Up to today, 5,300 members of the community have been infected with corona and 97 have died, which for us is a very large number. The pandemic has had a very big impact. The communities and schools have financial problems and members face very difficult times. The community has established different programs to help them, and we are promoting permanent activities to keep them engaged using the technology. We also have a very strong program to help the needy people, and we even supported the government with ultra freezers to help them during the vaccination campaign that started a few weeks ago. Regarding anti-Semitism, it has never been an official policy in Mexico. The country has an anti-discriminatory law that was approved in 2003, and our community was a very active member in this effort. And now we have this law that has the term anti-Semitism as a discriminatory act. Nevertheless, incidents occur, and the most common cases we have is swastikas painting and comments in social media and in the regular traditional media. The dynamic of the Israeli-Arab situation and the conflict is the main cause of anti-Semitic comments in the media and in the written press. For example, if you remember when President Trump tweeted, well, one of the days he tweeted about the wall, and Netanyahu supported this tweet. This created a very difficult situation for the Jewish community in Mexico because we started having a lot of anti-Semitic tweets, and the community had to send an open letter saying that we respect Minister Netanyahu, but that we don't agree with this tweet. And this lowered the anti-Semitic comments. We like to have a proactive initiative. Our policy is to start working before the problems come, and we think that this has been good for us. Regarding Israel, relations between Israel and Mexico were established in 1952. Since then, the interaction between both countries has been growing, especially after the signature of the free trade agreement that was in 2000, and the many cultural and technological problems that have been developed through the years. I have to tell you that the relation is good and strong on the bilateral level, but on the multilateral level, it's difficult because Mexico is frequently votes with the rest of the Latin American countries in decisions and resolutions against Israel. Mexico and Panama, I don't know if you know, are the only two countries in Latin America that have not recognized Palestine as a state. And we do have small pro-Palestinian groups that promote anti-Israeli activities and that want the country to recognize Palestine. But at the same time, the support of Israel in the earthquake, that very difficult earthquake that we had in 2017, and also during the pandemic, has given a very good image of Israel to the country. Regarding United States, Well, I have to recognize that the United States is the most important country for Mexico. Its relations is a complex one. We are united by a shared border, trade, and demographic, but yet we are divided by a lot of conflicts and legacies of history. This situation became a little bit more difficult during the presidency of Mr. Trump, because with all the comments against Mexico and Mexican citizens, this created a very antagonic situation, and people were very angry at these comments. Today, this image is changing with Mr. Biden's presidency. And last, as I was sharing with Mindy and Jerry the other day, our community, we have a lot of volunteers. We have over 5,000 volunteers. That's what we think. They are working in different activities, and every time that we have a new problem, we also see new members of the communities that try to help and develop new strategies to help the country and help the community. And this is a glance of what I would like to share with you of our community. And I would be more than willing to give the floor to Mindy and see what the questions of the audience are.
Okay, let me see. I think I'm unmuted, am I? Can you hear me?
Yes, we can
All
hear
right,
you.
good. Thank you very much. I think you'll all agree with me that that was a wonderful video and captured so much in a very short space of time, a lot to think about. And some of it will come out in questions. Because the United States is so polarized and so politicized, of course, there are questions now on the political life of the Jewish community in Mexico. And as Renee has told us, there are many communities within the larger community. So can you characterize any overall leaning among the Jewish community as a whole in Mexico? Would you say it's centrist, more right-wing, more left-wing? Are you able to even categorize it?
I think that for me, as you may know, for many years, Mexico had a one-party in the political arena. So everybody was with that party because was the only one. Since things started changing around 20 years ago, we've seen that people are diversified. I would think that we are centered, but we also have a lot of people, mainly young people, most of them, that are on the left side. And it's not such a difference it's not like in the States that you have so much difference between one and the other. Mainly they are the same. And we have people in all, supporting all the political parties.
Okay, somebody asks about relations with Ambassador Jacobson, I think was the name?
Yes, Roberta.
Yeah, I don't think all of us know who that is, so maybe you could explain.
Yes, Roberta Jacobson was the ambassador of the United States to Mexico. She left when President Trump took office. She was here for around maybe 2 years, and now she's working with President Biden and helping him with all the issues around migration and the relation with Mexico. She was a very good representative of the United States. She is of Jewish origin. She was close to the community, and she made a very good impression on the Mexican population. She was active. She participated in many different activities, and she was very respected in our country.
Okay, that's great. People are interested in the breakdown of religious identities. The film mentioned the Orthodox strength in Mexico, but and the conservative movement has some presence there. What about Reconstructionist and Reform communities?
We don't have any Reform or any Reconstructionist communities in Mexico, but I have to tell you that these communities that are named Orthodox, they are Orthodox it doesn't mean that every member of the community is Orthodox. They have like for example, they have separate women and men sitting in the shul. They have kosher in all the activities. They are shomer Shabbat as a community, but every member has the prerogative of doing whatever they want. But we don't have any, as I said, any reconstruction or reform. The movement, the religious movement has been growing a lot because, as you saw in the movie, in the video, we have many religious schools that they are yeshivot, and a lot of kids are going there, and they're growing. And since many of the religious families have more kids than the non-religious, we see a growth in this sector.
Okay, that's very interesting. People are interested to know about the demographic breakdown of the Jewish community and also where people live. Someone wants to know about Jewish presence in the Yucatan and in Mexico City, of course.
Okay, as the video says, mainly the Jewish community lives in Mexico City. In Mexico City and the state of Mexico that are really together. There's no separate between both of them. We have this area, it's about 20 million people, and 95% of the Jews live in this area. And we have small communities in other cities as very small, about 200 people or 200 families at the most. We have a new community that is building in Yucatan, in the city of Mérida, which is very active, and it has very few months that it's starting to build there.
Okay, well, we'll go back in time. There's always interest in the presence of Jews from the early days. And of course, the presence of the Inquisition looms as a presence in countries in Latin America. What about crypto-Jews? And have people from that world been returning to the larger Jewish community? Is there interest in studying their history and what happened to them?
Yes, we have, for example, in Monterrey, which is a city in the north part of the country, that was built mainly by Jews that came and were part of the country during the many centuries ago, and that they tell the stories that they learned from their families, that they light candles in Shabbat, that they made some prayers. So we know that they were Jews, and they converted. They married to non-Jews, and they converted they stopped being Jews. We have a small community in Venta Prieta, which is near Mexico City, that was formed by Jews that were coming from, the origins were from crypto-Judíos. We have this building of the Inquisition that you can visit it, and you can see all the stories of Jews that came. And we have a city also near Mexico City, when you can see the first mikveh in all Latin America that comes from many years ago. So the presence is of Jewish communities in the country was very active for many years. And during the 16th and 17th century, it began to get lost. And until the end of the 19th and the beginning of the century is when the Jews came back to the country. So all that are, except the one that I told you in Venta Prieta, all the rest are of recent origin. Okay.
It's always interesting to see interfaith activities. And of course, Catholicism is so deeply a part of Mexican Catholic identity. What about the Muslim community and the Protestant communities? What about Buddhists? Are these other traditions represented in the country and involved in interfaith work?
Yes, they're represented in very small numbers. Of course, Christians are very big, not as big as the Catholic Church, but they're very big. We are all part of an interreligious group, and we participate in different activities where we have representatives of all the communities. We have a very small Muslim community, which numbers around 4,000 people. And we don't have any direct relation with all this. We just meet through these organizations.
Okay, somebody expressed, I guess you would say almost amazement at the low percentage of intermarriage. Could you talk a little bit more about that? That's very different from the United States.
Yes, we think that the issue of having 95% of the kids going to a Jewish day school has a very strong impact in the identity of these kids.
Mm-hmm.
And what we have is people that want to belong to the community. As I was sharing the other day, the difference between our community and other communities is that people don't belong to a community center or a synagogue. They belong to a community, and the community gives you services since you are born until you're 120 years gone. So
Right.
they give you all type of services, and they help you, and they make you feel part of it. It's like an umbrella that protects you. So people like to belong. Of course, we have a small percentage of people that don't belong to any community, but most of them do. And what happens is that people who had married somebody from a different religion, most of them convert to Judaism because they want to be part of this network.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay. Again, there's always interest in economic and trade transactions here. Does the federal government, the national government, give any support to the Jewish schools?
No, not at all. All the private schools, they're on their own, and we pay a high tuition. The members of the community, as some of other private schools, and the community gives around 30% of scholars of the kids that go to a Jewish school in our network receive a scholarship from their communities because it's very expensive.
Yeah, that's the challenge in this country too.
Mm-hmm. But the communities are very encouraged in having every Jewish kid in their schools. So they do whatever is necessary to have them inside our network.
Okay, there's interest again in what Jewish people do in Mexico. And somebody asks about the presence of Jews in the chocolate trade. Somehow, Beryl Newman believes that there were Jews involved in the chocolate trade early on. Is this true?
I never heard about that. It's the first time.
Okay.
The Jews that came to our country many century ago, they started selling house by house. In fact, they were the ones that starting with this tradition that's called aboneros in Spanish. That's you go house by house selling and recollecting the money. And afterwards, when they started doing better, they opened textile businesses. And then they were in the textile business for many years until the country opened and started the free trade agreement with the United States, and they opened to China. And this issue became less profitable. And now we have a lot of people in construction. We have in restaurants, and in every business that you name. We have people, we have Jews in everything except very few in politics.
Yeah, there's interest in that too. And when we talked the other day, you mentioned that there are no Jewish people in the Mexican governing body. What is it called? The Congress?
In the Congress, we don't have anybody, any Jew now. We did have in the past years. We have the mayor of Mexico City. She's of Jewish origin, but she doesn't belong to the community properly saying. But we have what we're seeing is that young people are very interested in participating in politics. So they're starting to work and get engaged and be supporting different parties. And we think this is going to change.
Okay, there are obviously people on this call here who know something about Mexico. And somebody asks you to talk about the English-speaking congregation Beth Israel and its former rabbi Lehrer and his activities.
Yes, he was a very well-known man. This community was established by Jews that came from out of the country, English-speaking, and for many, many years, their services were done in English. And Rabbi Lehrer was an institution, and he really was. And he passed away a few years ago. And now Beth Israel communities, it's a very small community, and but they're still managing to keep alive what they have.
Okay. There's interest in the whole issue of personal security, and someone asks if people are looking for security around their homes, but let's take that further, security around the synagogues. Is that something that is being enforced? Do you have security committees around the synagogues working to ensure personal security?
Yes, we have two security committees. One of them is it's the one that takes care of the institutions, and they have a very big network of non-professional people that work, and they take care of all the synagogues and community centers that we have. By the way, there are a lot. For example, we have 14 schools, and we have many synagogues, and they are present every day, and they take care of all this network of institutions. At the same time, we have another committee, that's the Acción Social, which takes care of domestic violence. A few years ago, well, about 20 years ago, we started having a lot of kidnaps in the country, not against Jews, but Jews were part of the population. So we suffered this phenomena, and this committee was established to help people. And the first thing that they do is, when somebody is victim of any type of extortion, robbery, or whatever it is, they help them, but they have to file a complaint, they have to work with the authorities, and they keep close to them, working until the problem is solved. So crime, it's a difficult issue in Mexico. We've been seeing, as I was telling you the other day, last year it lowered because of the pandemic. People didn't go out, so we didn't have many cases, but it's a difficult thing. Extortion and robbery by Colombian groups that come to Mexico and are doing a lot of nasty things.
Okay. What about Chabad? And does Chabad contribute to the growing Orthodox proclivities in Mexico?
We have Chabad, but the truth is that the Jewish Orthodox community is so strong that by ourselves we have all that needs to. But of course, there's Chabad, and they have their movement, and they have their little house, and they're active.
Okay. Again, someone asked a question that it's kind of difficult to answer, but the question is, do you think that Mexican Jews feel more Jewish Mexican or Mexican Jewish?
This is a question that I always ask high school students when I have talks with them. And I think that it's a combination, it's a new identity. It's not first Jews or first Mexican, it's combined. And to tell you the best example is that Mexico, the Jewish community, they eat gefilte fish a la veracruzana. Veracruzana, it's a type of dish that is usually done in Mexico with fish. Or they eat quipe with guacamole. And this tells you how the new identity, and that we understand that you don't have to be one first or the other one, but that you're enriched by both traditions. So it makes you feel comfortable with who you are.
Yeah, cuisine tells a lot. I think this would be a good time to have people ask their own questions. And if you want to raise your hands, we'll try to find you. Richard Sadler, you were interested in asking something. So if we could unmute you, Jerry. Richard?
Hi.
Hi.
Hola, Renee.
Hola.
I just joined. I had trouble joining, but I came at a good time. You mentioned Rabbi Lehrer. He bar mitzvahed me at the BICC in La Ciudad de Mexico.
Okay.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yes.
We moved down there in 1958. I was 5. So I guess my bar mitzvah was around 1966. And I lived a normal life. We went to Hebrew school twice a week. I joined the Yichud Habonim. Renee, are you familiar with that?
Yes, of course.
It's-
Habonim, oh yeah, not
Yes,
interesting.
and we were members of the Centro Deportivo Israelita. Have you talked about it?
It was only shown in the video. I didn't say anything about it.
Oh, I didn't. I missed the video. We did have the opportunity to go back to Mexico a few years ago, and we went to see the synagogue. It was things are a little different these days. You mentioned security. It was a little harder to get in this time. Previously, you would just walk in, but now they have guards. But they let us in, and we got to see the plaque of my bar mitzvah. We made a little donation, and then my daughter went back a few years later. So we feel like it's part of our life.
When you are willing to come, just let me know and I will fix everything so they'll let you in very fast.
Okay, my brother is Mexican, as he was born in Mexico while we were there. And the reason we went to Mexico was because we have relatives there. You know, in the early 1900s, they closed off the immigration to the United States. So some of the family who couldn't come here ended up in Mexico, and another group ended up in Canada. So everybody got scattered. And we went there because our Mexican family invited my father to do some work there. So that's why we spent 10 years there. And some of the family is still in Mexico.
Okay, Richard, that's absolutely fascinating.
I would like to talk a little bit about the Centro Deportivo Israelita, now that Richard just mentioned it. As you saw in the video, it's a very big institution. And 2 years ago, we had the Maccabi Pan American Games, which was inaugurated by Mayor of Mexico City. And we had thousands of sports and competitors and everything, and it was very interesting. And they do every year, they have a beautiful festival where people dance, and they have theaters, and it's called La Casa de Todos, everybody's home, because it's open to everybody. We are very proud of the sports center as well.
Okay, Beryl Norman, if you could come back, because you seem to have some very interesting information about the Jews and the chocolate trade.
I would like to know about that because I never heard it.
Beryl, are you there?
Can you hear me? I'm here.
Okay, you're somewhere. I don't
Probably see me.
Hi.
Go ahead.
Hello. I'm just learning Spanish over the internet, so I don't know much. But muchas gracias. I had attended for about 2 years ago with the Sisterhood of another Jewish congregation, and what they mentioned, to me was that I may have geography wrong, but that the early Jewish traders were involved in the chocolate trade because when they encountered Native peoples was willing to do a trade relationship with them, because the Native peoples were scared of other groups that may want to take their land and things like that. But what I learned in the lecture was that the Jewish traders just wanted to do business, and so from the Native peoples, the Jewish traders learned how to stabilize the components to make chocolate, and no other group of people had that secret for a while. But then eventually the Jews were forced out of the chocolate trade. And I don't know hardly anything about Mexico and the crops and things, but I was just curious if because the film said that they had been there since 1519, so I assume that they had been doing something along the lines of trade during that very early period.
I never heard about it, but I'm surely going to investigate it because it's something interesting. It's new for me, but could be.
Well, nice that we can share information. There's interest in the role of Jewish people in the media. Of course, in the United States, people who are Jewish have played really powerful roles in the press, and not only in the press, in film, in theater. Talk a little bit about that role in Mexico.
We have a strong presence in journalism. Some of the most important journalists are Jews, and they are very respected. And we are seeing a new thing, that we have many young people that are in cinema. For example, we have this guy that's called Michel Franco, who won the Berlin or some important prize. We have Lubezki, which is the photograph that also won an Oscar. So we are seeing a lot of people getting into cinema and journalism and academics, writers, a lot of writers. Okay. We had one guy named Jacobo Zabludowski, which was an institution. He was like the teacher of all journalists in Mexico.
So from what you're saying, even though there are no Jews now in the Congress, would you say that people feel integrated in Mexican society?
Yes, I do feel, and I think the Jewish community, it's an important player in the country. I do think so.
Okay, somebody asked specifically that. Okay, people would like to see the video, a film, so maybe you could send information on that to Jerry, and then we could share that. Somebody asked about Trotsky, who turned up in Mexico. Is there much that you can say about his time there?
There's this movie Netflix that will explain it better than me. As you know, he came to the country, and then he died, but he was not close to the community, even though he was a Jewish origin. I can share with you that his granddaughters studied with me, but they never spoke. I think they were his great-granddaughters. Oh. We went to an American school, and they were part of us. Their last name was Volkov, but they never talked about him. So there's not too much that I can say.
Lolita. Estoy viendo un Zoom que es los judíos en México.
I don't know who's speaking.
Se puede meter, está muy interesante para que sepas la historia de Vela y todas estas. Están muy ordenados los judíos.
Okay, not everybody understands Spanish, so that needs to be translated.
Centro judío, te desperté.
She's invited somebody that's with her to enter to the Zoom.
Okay, ya te dice que podías ver tú también el Zoom.
I don't know who she is.
Bueno, más tarde, okay? Bye.
We don't know who's speaking. Okay. Any other people want to raise their hands? Steve Cohen. Steve? Unmute yourself, Steve, or Jerry unmute Steve. That's not, we're not connecting, okay.
At this point can unmute themselves, though I will remute them if they're not really the speaker.
All right.
Okay, there we go. I got it.
Thank you. Okay, Steve, go ahead.
I went to a crypto Judaism seminar in Denver. There is a book written by Rabbi Debbie Prince, Prinze, called On the Chocolate Trail, a delicious adventure connecting Jews, religion, history, travel, rituals, and recipes to the magic of cacao, where she traced the chocolate history from Europe. And every time they got kicked out of a country, they took all the chocolate making machines and traveled from country to country to country. And they ended up landing in Mexico, where they created a chocolate trade. And she wrote a great history of how these chocolate is kosher and where they made it and how they made it. So it's Deborah Prince, Prinze.
I'm going to look at it. We have a very big kosher industry in Mexico. and very good chocolates. So I'm going to see if any of them are part of this effort.
Okay,
Jews have been very, very instrumental in chocolate completely around the world. As Steve says, there's books about it. And in Israel, the chocolate industry is gigantic, and they have outlets in this country and all around the world. Also, a lot of the chocolate shops in this country are really Israeli. So chocolate and Jews are really very, very closely related.
Okay, I'd like Vivian Gelber to come on because she has some interesting personal stories to recount about the Jewish presence in the film industry and also in theater. Vivian, are you still here?
Yeah, I'm here, but I don't know how to, there you go. I'm here. Hi.
Okay, please say what you wrote in the chat.
Yeah, well, my father was born in Mexico. His grandparents were Yiddish theater actors that came from Europe on a tour of the Americas before the war. They started in Argentina and ended up in Mexico, and then they couldn't go back to Europe. So they stayed in Mexico, and they were one of the founders of the Yiddish theater in Mexico. And my father, when he was 12, 13 years old, he was in a movie called La Ciudad de los Niños from Monterrey. And
I just got there.
He actually won Ariel. It's like the equivalent of an Oscar. So when he was 13, he won the Ariel 1958. And I think he's the youngest one to ever win an Ariel award. And well, I live in Manhattan, New York, but I was born in Costa Rica. My father left Mexico and he married my mother, who's Costa Rican, and they moved to Costa Rica. And I was born there, and now I live in New York.
Thank you, Vivian.
Okay.
Yes, Yiddish was a very strong issue.
Yeah.
Many schools of our network of schools, 4 of them were used to teach Yiddish until a few years ago. And one of the private universities has a course of Yiddish.
Okay, there's interest. Vivian already talked about migration flows and her father in Mexico and then Costa Rica, and now she's in Manhattan. What about people coming to Mexico? I'm not talking about the people who've been in difficulties with US authorities, but people from other parts of Latin America coming to Mexico, the migration flows now.
The migration flow, it's mainly, we are a community that doesn't grow, or it keeps the same size almost every time. We have a few members of the community, some members of the community made Aliyah, and some of them came back. And we received people from Argentina when they had this problem with the economic problems. They stayed for a few years, then they went back, and some of them from Venezuela. As we were saying the other day, we are seeing growing that young kids like to go to study to the States, and they decide to stay there. But usually the number stays the same. Let's see in the following years how this will develop.
There's interest, again, going back to the schools, the Jewish schools. They're taught in Spanish, I imagine. And then is there separate classes? Are there separate classes in Hebrew language and then maybe classes in English? Or what are the language opportunities in the Jewish schools?
They all have Spanish, of course. We have some of them that are English speaking. So part of the curricula is taught in English. And of course, Hebrew. All the subjects that have to do with Hebrew, they're taught in Hebrew. So most of the kids that finish schools, and I see that we have Samuel Schuster as part of one of the participants, and when he was living in Mexico, he was very active in the school system. And we have the English, Hebrew, and Spanish.
Okay, folks, this is your chance to ask directly to Renee without intermediaries like me. So if you want to raise your hand, please do that. And Jerry can watch also.
Yeah, I ask people to use the icon in the participants list. On the bottom, there's a place for icons, I believe.
Well, not everybody's comfortable with that, but we'd like you to ask your questions to Renee directly.
I think Morris wanted to ask something.
If the language of instruction on the Jewish side is Hebrew, how is Jewish literature reflected in what people learn? Because a lot of that literature is in Yiddish.
That's a good question. I really don't think that Yiddish is taught in any of our institutions anymore.
Is it taught in translation? In translation to Hebrew or English?
Yes, in translation to Spanish.
To Spanish.
Yes.
Yes, there's quite a bit of that.
Okay, interest again on the training of rabbis and cantors. Where do most of the rabbis in Mexico, and you mentioned there are a good number of synagogues, where do they get their training?
For many years, we had rabbis coming from Argentina and from Israel. We have some, the conservative came from the conservative seminar. Now we have a big amount of rabbis that are trained in Mexico City, and Hazanim and all type of, we have a big religious movement. And we have every kind of profession regarding the Orthodox religion very active in Mexico.
Okay. Much contact with the Jewish community in Cuba?
We have contact because for many years, the Jewish community of Mexico used to come once a year at least to Cuba and to help them mainly with kosher food for Passover and helping them with other aspects.
Does that continue?
It continues, but at a lower level. We have a group of like a committee that used to do it very, very good. Now it's a little bit low.
Okay. Let's see. People are mentioning various books and different things. Somebody asks, since most of the Jewish children go to Jewish day schools, opportunities to meet with children from other cultures and communities. We've talked about what their parents are doing and the work in volunteer activities and interfaith work. What about the children who are in these Jewish schools and then in intra and inter-Jewish community activities? What about their interplay with the non-Jewish children?
The truth is that for many of our kids, they meet only with Jewish school when they are young, and until they go to university, to colleges, when they open to other sectors. Of course, there's parents that want their kids to open more, so they have in the afternoon classes in other places that's not the sports center or the community center where they meet with non-Jews. But what we see is that even though they stay their whole basic education in the Jewish network, when they get to college, they manage to relate very well with the non-Jewish population. And Tribuna has a program that's called Jornadas Judaicas, in which for 1 or 2 days, we work in the universities, we give talks about what is Judaism, what we believe, what we eat, how we do, and we work with Jewish students so they can integrate better to the society.
Mandy, there's some people with raised hands.
Let me see. I can't see everyone. Ashley Brown asks about Ladino spoken in the Sephardic community.
Yes, the Sephardic community has a good tradition of Ladino. We even have a group that sings and plays and has plays in Ladino, and they have this they're very attached, even though they don't talk Ladino every day in their daily lives.
How different is it from the Spanish that you speak?
No, it's very similar. Ladino, in fact, it's an old Spanish, and it's very difficult, very similar. Of course, it has a lot of words that you wouldn't understand if you only spoke Spanish, but it's a little bit similar.
Okay. David Epstein, I think, would
He's
like
not
to
there.
ask something.
Mindy, he's not there anymore.
All right.
But Ashley Brown name here has a hand up. If you look at the very top of the participants list, people have hands up.
Well, you could certainly call on them.
I'll call on them. Do you have anything more to say, Mr. Brown, or that's your name? You mute. You have to unmute yourself. You're still muted. On the lower left-hand corner of your picture, there should be a way to unmute. You just press unmute. We'll come back. We'll come back to you when you have that figured out. How about Helen Ruther? You seem to have your hand up. You have a question.
Unfortunately, it's not quite seamless with the muting and unmuting, and sorry, there are some gaps here, but we're trying.
Yeah, you should be able to unmute yourself.
While she unmutes, I see somebody that's asking if all Jews live in Polanco.
Okay, now am I unmuted? Yeah,
Yes, you
now
are.
I can ask my question.
Sure.
I have two questions. One, when I was in Mexico City in 1954, I had family there, and we went to a country club, I guess it was. Is that still around? Is it?
Yes, that's the sports center. Yes.
Oh, that is the sports center,
Yes.
right? My other question was, the film showed these different groups from Aleppo, from Turkey. They're all together? Do they interact with each other, these different groups?
Yes, they do. As the video said, they are autonomous. They have their own system of providing help or religious and everything, but they're all together. And Mindy was asking me, do they marry between the communities?
Yeah, right.
And they do. They do. Many years ago, it was unheard, but now it's very common. And people from one community marry with the other community, and it's very common. And they are creating a new identity of Mexican Jews, not necessarily belonging from where they came, their grandparents came. And all these communities, as I said, they give you services, but to the outside, there's just one word, one voice, and it's the voice of the Central Committee. And it's very interesting because people do respect that, and they let the Central Committee do their job of relating and creating relationships with the government.
Mr. Brown has unmuted himself. I think he'd like to ask a question or make a comment.
Yeah, I wanted to follow up. You mentioned that in Monterey there were conversos, and we also know in the U.S. that New Mexico was settled, but many of the early settlers were conversos or Marranos, and we also heard when we talked about Brazil that there are conversos or Jewish communities actually trying to allow them to come out in the open that they haven't done really. And I'm wondering if there are any efforts to do that in Mexico, or if you have also more information about the original Spanish people that came, how many of them were Jews who were fleeing the Inquisition?
There, as I told you, there's this small community in Venta Prieta, which is formed by Jews that came during the Inquisition of before. Now each community, there's no efforts because each community has their own members and they deal with their own members. So if somebody wants to become member of the community, that's a different story. But the Central Committee doesn't encourage new communities to belong to the Central Committee. I don't know if I answered your question.
Well, you answered half of it. The other half was just if you have any idea about of the original Spanish that came over, the conquistadores and afterwards. Well, what percent of those were
I don't know exactly the number, but they were a lot. They were a lot, and I think they made an impression in the country, and you can see it in different parts of the country.
Okay, Karen Ruff had a question or a comment to make. You have to unmute yourself.
Karen, we can't hear you.
Unmute. There we go. Okay. Oh, sorry. I was getting that you can't unmute yourself message.
Yeah.
So I was curious about the history of Jewish communities of French or Alsatian origin in Mexico, and whether there's any remnant of that community left. Because my great grandmother's generation were in Mexico in the early 20th century. As far as I can tell, they were a very tight-knit, insular, French-speaking community. And the relatives that I know of moved to Guatemala, and we're still speaking French in Guatemala in the second half of the 20th century. But I don't know whether that is an identifiable community among all the others that still persists.
No. They are part of the Ashkenazi community at the most, and we don't have many
Interesting.
French-speaking, yes.
I think probably they, as far as I can tell, it's a group who came after the Franco-Prussian War because they were on the French-German border, but they were French identified and Jewish, but very, very assimilated in France, but came to Mexico in the late 19th century. So interesting.
Yes, I saw a question that was asking about how they treat people with disabilities here in the community, and I would like to share this. We have this committee that's called Kadima, and the interesting of this committee is to reinsert people with disability in the community. So they give them jobs and they make them be part of schools, and they are doing a very good job of keeping these people inside of community, because for many years this was like a non-spoken issue and nobody talked about somebody that had a child with disability, and this is very open now and very good managed.
Okay, there's always interest in one's personal story. So Beryl Newman asks about your own history, your connection with Syria, and of course Syria is now in a very tragic situation. Do people still have contacts with their Syrian relatives?
Well, it's difficult now because there's no Jews in Syria anymore. Around 1991 was the last big wave of Syrian Jews that left the country. In fact, we went to New York with Rabbi Hamra, who was very important in taking people of Jews out of Syria. My grandmother and on my father's side, my grandmother and my grandfather were born in Syria. And on my mother's side, my grandfather was born in Iran, in Persia at that time. And my grandmother was born in Mexico. And we are very close to the traditions. Like, for example, we were talking about food. In every Syrian house, every Friday, they served the same food. That was what they served in their great-grandparents in Syria. And we still have some people alive that they came from Syria, so they tell the stories, and we are proud of our origin. We are.
Yeah, Betty Sinowitz asks a very interesting question. There is so much interesting literature by Jewish writers in the United States, but in other countries as well. Has that contemporary, or a little earlier, has that been translated into Spanish? What access do Spanish-speaking Jews have to the broader literature? I'm not talking about Yiddish anymore. I'm talking about literature in English or maybe French or other languages.
Well, Mexico is not a country where people read a lot, not the Jews, but in general. So you can find literature that it's translated from the origins in very good libraries that we have in Mexico. And also now with all the Kindle and everything, you can find it. And many, many Jews, they speak English, so it's very easy for them to read in English also.
Okay, Jerry, do you scan other hands raised?
There are a number of hands up. There's Latia Gomez. Do you have a question or a comment?
Yeah, buenas noches, Renee. I was just wondering, you were talking about food and, you know, the kibe with guacamole. Is there a Mexican Jewish
Cuisine.
Yeah, cuisine or cookbook or something that
there's many. I'm glad that you're asking this question, because we have a lot of chefs that are doing wonderful things with their Jewish and Mexican origins. So they have many books. I could share them with you, and many restaurants where they sell. In fact, more than restaurants, we have these women that do a lot of nice food and they send it to your house. But I will share with Jerry and Mindy the books, so you can buy them there also on Amazon.
Yeah, we'll inform everyone. I think